It's my nerd world, and welcome to it. And on this week's episode, I'll continue to share my thoughts on Memento Mori, the themes of the album. Plus, is a leak of Memento Mori imminent? I'll tell you what I know. I'll share my thoughts on whether or not that's going to be happening soon. Plus, this week's Listener Spotlight. Got a lot of listener feedback to dive into. And a very special cover of Heaven from an artist, Pamela Chellan, that I want to share with you. Details of where you can find the song are available in the notes for this week's episode. Let's go ahead and get to it.
Hello, this is Martin Gore from Depeche Mode.
Hi, this is Dave Gahan from Depeche Mode, and you are listening to
My Nerd World.
Welcome to it. I'm your host, Jon Justice. Glad you are checking out another episode of this week. And thank you to Jason, also known as Tokyo Skyline, for this week's new intro music. Freshening things up a bit. I greatly appreciate it. If you want to email me, talkshownerd@gmail.com. Of course, if you're listening on YouTube, you can drop me a comment there as well, as many of you have, and we'll get into some listener feedback later on in the show. Like and subscribe to the channel, and also, if you're listening to it on a podcast platform, be sure you subscribe so you never go and miss an episode. And you can always head on over to mynerdworld.net, where you can find out about everything related to My Nerd World. There's a blog up there as well. Don't post on there nearly as much as I probably should. I do put all the links to the shows available there on the website. And of course, if you are a science fiction reader, you can check out my EMBARK science fiction space opera series there at mynerdworld.net. As I mentioned at the end of this week's episode, I'm really excited to share with you an amazing cover by Pamela Chellan. And the details of where you can find it for yourself are available in the notes on the show, so we'll do that after listener feedback this week. So, I'll be honest, I was considering not putting out another episode until the album is released here in 2 weeks. And a part of it is, because I'm not going to lie, I feel kind of bad. I want everybody to hear this record, and I hope that if you're coming here to the podcast and you've been enjoying what you're hearing, that just know that I can't wait to hear what everybody else thinks of the record, and I just feel incredibly blessed that I've had the opportunity to listen to the album as many times as I have prior to its release. And there was, again, a part of me that was like, maybe I'll just wait until and share the rest of my thoughts once the album comes out. But I know from my perspective, if I didn't have the opportunity to hear the album, I certainly would want to hear from people who have heard from the album. So hopefully I'm sharing content with you about Memento Mori, even though you can't listen to it yet, that you are appreciating and enjoying. And I'm looking forward to the album coming out as well. The copy that I have is probably about a 6 out of 10. It's very noticeable because I dropped in Ghosts Again, the released version, into my playlist for the copy of the album that I have. And going from track to track, you can definitely tell in terms of quality of the version that I got. Plus, as I mentioned, there's a watermark on my copy as well. So, anyway, I hope you continue to enjoy the show. I decided that I did have more than I wanted to share and that I would continue to release episodes up until the and after the release of the album, of course, because I can't wait to hear what you think, especially all the people that are going to tell me how full of it I was, as they may not appreciate the album as much as I do, which I fully expect. As I've always said, this is all subjective. These are my views of the album based off of many listens now, and I'll talk a little bit about this because somebody just today on Twitter was asking me how the album was growing on me, and I'll share my thoughts on that. So, first off, there's a lot going around on the forums, a lot of people reaching out to me, expectations that a leak of Memento Mori is imminent. This is largely, my understanding, this is largely stemming from some websites overseas, especially one particular forum that's released all of the lyrics. Now I have all the lyrics myself, and if you don't follow me on social media at My Nerd World, you might want to do that on Twitter. At THE My Nerd World, at My Nerd World. You might want to do that. But there's a lot of people that I think are convinced that because the lyrics are now out there, that this is indicative that a leak is imminent. I'm not so sure that's the reality. I think the lyrics getting out into the ether is more indicative of the initial copies that have been kind of floating around that haven't been leaked. I expect a leak of Memento Mori, but honestly, I believe it's going to be closer to the release date as more physical copies end up circulating. Listen, when it is leaked officially, I'll let everybody know on the podcast. I'm convinced that the vast majority of people who would go and download a leaked copy of the record will go and buy the album anyways. And I know there's a lot of individuals that'll simply wait until the physical release. I think we all sort of have our own different standards on when and how we want to listen to new Depeche Mode music. And I have every intention of buying physical copies, different versions of the physical release once it comes out. So I suppose that's my way of justifying hearing my version early. But when and if it does leak, I'll be sure to put out a show and just let you know that it's out there. And most people are pretty savvy enough to go and find out where it is. And usually when Depeche Mode stuff leaks early, people are quick to sort of spread around where it's been found. So, with that being said, I do want to talk a little bit more just about the album and specifically sort of the themes of the album to add further context to Memento Mori. Specifically, if you've been paying attention to any of the interviews, Martin has mentioned, less so Dave. I think Dave, and let me talk about Dave first because he's kind of the quicker one to move through. Dave's songwriting kind of falls under a certain vein, as does Martin's. But Dave's usually is sort of love-related, loss-related, with addiction tossed into the mix within the songs. And that's no different on the Dave Penn tracks on Memento Mori. I do find it interesting because as it relates to Martin Gore, he's mentioned the pandemic and him writing during the pandemic and the influences on that. I think that can be heard in, I would think, unless it's Dave's portion of the writing of Wagging Tongue, that was the song that Martin and Dave worked on together. But the angel dying lines, if you're going to go and relate it to anything, I would think that would be pandemic related. But Martin also mentioned in several of his interviews, his turning 60 had a major impact on him as he began to think more about his mortality. And I think that's influenced the lyrics on Memento Mori. But we also get diversity in the lyrical content with the writing partnership of Richard Butler. And I'm very interested, and I mentioned this on a previous episode, I'm very interested to hear from you and whether or not you notice the difference in some of the lyrics and the way the lyrics flow that aren't typical to Martin or Dave. Caroline's Monkey, I think, is probably the one that stands out the most to me as a track that seems to have that Richard Butler influence. But there's a couple other songs that are the other songs that Martin worked on with Richard. I think there's just some lyrical stylings that aren't necessarily, you wouldn't necessarily think that Martin would write that. And I could be just injecting my own opinion into this, meaning that if we, because we probably won't find out, if we were to find out exactly between Martin and Richard who wrote what lyric directly, I'll probably end up finding out that I was completely off on who wrote what, and it was Martin that actually wrote a line that I thought was attributable to, did I just make up a word, attributable? Could be attributed to Richard Butler. But again, I'm very interested because I've already seen some commentary of individuals talking about the lyrics that have gotten out there about how that sounds typical Martin. That seems more like Richard Butler. There's definitely an influence there. I'm just curious how noticeable it'll be for you once you hear the album. There's no political leanings for the most part on this album, apart from one particular track that I'll talk about here in a moment. Certainly, by comparison to Spirit. Going back and listening to portions of Spirit, by the way, this is something that after many listens to the record, that I've kind of formulated another viewpoint on this. But Spirit, on some of those tracks, whether it's You Move or Scum, it almost sounds experimental compared to Memento Mori. Memento Mori has this very distinct Depeche Mode vibe to it that keeps drawing me back to comparisons to Songs of Faith and Devotion, Violator, Black Celebration, Music for the Masses era. And I know that that's rubbed some people the wrong way, and I've had comments from individuals that I won't share because I don't like to share negative things on here, saying that basically they've hated everything and they think it sucks in the band, everything after Songs of Faith and Devotion, and now on left, and they shouldn't have released anything at all. And it's just ridiculous nonsense. But there is just something very distinctly Depeche Mode about this record. And that's not to say that the previous, past recent releases haven't been like that, but there's just something about this record that has grabbed me. A lot of it has to do with the lyrical content. Again, no political leanings for the most part, and this album seems more true to form to what we'd come to expect from Depeche Mode, and again, more specifically, that songwriting going back to that era I keep mentioning. Love, addiction, loss, death, devotion. We get some deviations in a song like Caroline's Monkey, which falls more in line with storytelling. Jezebel and Lillian come to mind on that front. And Lillian, I made the comparison to Never Let Me Go, and it's funny because I was listening to that, I don't think I talked about this last week, but I was listening to Never Let Me Go, and that song if I'm ranking all the songs, I've come to really enjoy that song more, but it's probably bottom of my list of all the songs on the album. If I had to rank them 1 through 12, it would probably come in at number 12. But there's a moment in the breakdown of Lillian that I really enjoy. Of Never Let Me Go that I really enjoy. And I kept thinking, this sounds like something else. This sounds like something else. This sounds like another Depeche Mode song. And I realized that it was Lillian. There's a part in the breakdown in the middle of the song where they go into this low-voiced singing rant, and it comes off very much like Lillian. And like I said before, if People Are Good is, People Are Good is to People Are People what Never Let Me Go is to Lillian. And when you hear the song, you know what I'm talking about. Now, in terms of political leanings, not really political, but People Are Good, which I've mentioned, is probably my second favorite song on the album. Okay. Don't Say You Love Me, Before We Drown, fantastic. But just in terms of repeat listens, People Are Good is just an amazing track to me. And I said it before, I tweeted it out earlier this week from the My Nerd World on Twitter that it's probably going to be the most divisive track on the album. It's very much in line with the commentary and lyrical stylings of People Are People and Say Like Everything Counts. Plus the way the song is constructed, the synth work in it, it's got the squeal that sounds like it's lifted directly from I Feel You, but it just has this 80s vibe to it and is very on the nose. It's just a cool Depeche Mode track. And I've said it before, I'll say it again, I'm shocked that the song exists. It's the one track on the album that is most different from all the others, and yet it still falls completely in line with the rest of the album, and I can't wait for you to hear it. Now, somebody did ask me today how the album was growing on me, and honestly, it's only improving. Songs that I liked, I'm now loving. And like I said before, I can't wait for myself to get a proper copy. The quality I have is about a 6 out of 10 and noticeable compared to the release of Ghosts Again. These songs are going to sound fantastic at high volume. I can't say enough good things about the production work and the beats, the synth work, and how layered the whole thing is. It's the combination of all of these things, a return to lyrical form for the band, getting back to those topics and the way that Martin and Dave writes, and I think the inclusion of Richard Butler that really just taps into really strong emotions. It's some of the best writing in a long, long time. The bluesy guitars are gone. You have fresh sounds. The album, again, sounds like something that's from today while still capturing a classic Depeche Mode feel that has me giving it such high praise. And I want to listen to it from start to finish, from the opening of My Cosmos Is Mine to the end. I mean, it just has that. It just has that combination where, and Dave mentioned this in an interview he did with, it was an NPR radio station in New York City that Dave listens to, and my apologies for not remembering what the call letters were, but I just listened to it yesterday. And he was talking about how he and Martin still very much care about the order of the songs on the album, and they pay close attention to that, and they definitely still produce the albums and put together the song track, the track listing in such a way where it gives you an overall feel. Like a lot of artists don't do that anymore simply because of the way that music is released nowadays. And, you know, how certain songs come out and they kind of release a few songs and then the album comes out. And I'm a huge fan of Churches, and Churches does this. They kind of release songs until the whole album comes out. And I'm sure that Churches puts the order of the songs together on the album in a very specific way, but, you know, Depeche Mode does it the same way. Martin and Dave do it the same way they always have, was where, you know, the listener is going to sit down and listen to this album from start to finish, and let's make sure the order of the songs is reflective of how we want them to experience, in this case, Memento Mori. And Dave mentioned My Cosmos Is Mine. He knew that would be the opening track. And he said from the start that he hoped that Speak to Me would close the album. And to their credit, I have to say that the album flows really, really well. It works exactly the way I think that they intended it to work. I'm trying to think of what songs I might move around, and I can't think of any. The only thing I would say is that, you know, perhaps a few songs could have been relegated to B-sides to make a tighter album, but, you know, I'd be hesitant to say which ones. I guess Never Let Me Go probably is the one that sticks out of my head just because it's my least favorite, even though I really do like that song on the album. But the rest of them I really, even Always You that I wasn't high on at first, I'm really become to love that song, and I wouldn't want to pitch that one off either. So one last comment on this, and then we'll dive over to the fan spotlight for this week. I've heard and I've received some commentary from individuals who've heard Wagging Tongue and My Favorite Stranger, the live versions, which aren't very good copies, obviously, and people equating it to sounding like Soul Savers. And don't judge what you've heard of My Favorite Stranger and Wagging Tongue. The album versions are much, much better. We'll get into this in one of the listener feedback comments, but I think when those songs were performed, that Dave was still kind of getting accustomed to singing it live, and you can tell it hurts those tracks. First off, the quality of the live releases of those is bad, but secondly, they just sound much better on the album and much different. So if you're worried about it sounding like Soul Savers, I wouldn't worry about it too much. There's nothing on the album that sounds like that. The only song that I thought sounded like a solo Dave track or Soul Savers was maybe Speak to Me. But even then, the way the song is worked with the end of the song and the way it kind of it breaks down and you get the looping sounds, and the layers and the texture of that song, I'm dispensing with that. It's Dave, obviously, as is Before We Drown, but they've really done such a good job on the production and the musical side of things that it is still wholly Depeche Mode in my opinion, and when I listen to it, I don't get those Dave solo or Soul Saver vibes. So I think those that if you maybe liked those songs but were kind of questioning them, you'll definitely be happy once you hear the album versions of both My Favorite Stranger and Wagging Tongue. And those were two songs that I liked, but were a little bit lower on my list of songs on the album. And those two songs I've really started to grow and love over multiple listens. All right, let's go to this week's fan spotlight. This one comes from Croatia. First things first. Thank you for the Depeche Mode podcast. Really, thank you. As you once said, I haven't been so excited about a new DM material for decades. I live in a small town in Croatia, so I don't have anyone here to share this devotion with. I guess I'm too old to read all those forums trying to distinct real informations from rumors. And as we all realize by now, Sony has done a pretty bad PR job leaving us in the dark all this time. Yeah, I really wish I knew when we were getting a physical release of the proper single release for Ghosts again with remixes. I'm still kind of shaking my head at that because I haven't heard anything. It was your podcast that reminded me of this beautiful worldwide community of devotees that feel exactly like me these days, going through the old records, reviving beautiful lifetime memories and counting the days to the release of new material. It was your voice that brought me back to my school days and all of the first-time songs, albums, and concerts. Wow, thank you. I really do appreciate that. And this would be, I'm going to jump to the end in his name. This is Kresimir Grubik. Kresimir Grubnik. And if I said your name wrong, if I pronounced it wrong, I absolutely apologize for that. And yes, I will share some of my stories with you. But for now, spoiler alert, and this is why I chose this week. This will completely change Ghosts again for a lot of people. It has a really deep meaning for a lot of people who lost someone, so I hope I will not spoil the song for you. It was the album title, the title of the song, and the video that led us all to the wrong conclusion. So, what Kresimir is laying out here is what they believe Ghosts Again is actually about. It's not a song about death, they write. It's a breakup song. I was thinking a lot about the meaning of the song, and I thought it's a song about death, as we all did. And things just don't add up as it relates to the lyrics. And then it struck me. It's a song about a breakup, and it's actually a pretty simple one. Lovers whisper in the end, lovers in the end whisper, we'll be ghosts again. It means we'll be ghosts to each other again, or we'll be ghosting each other again. We are ghosts to each other before we met, and we were alive together, and now we split up and go our separate ways to the life unaware of each other's existence in the future, just like ghosts. And then they go through and they break down the lyrics. So, wasted feelings, broken meanings, classic feeling at the end of a relationship, time fleeting, see what it brings. We have reached the end, it's time to move on. Hellos, goodbyes, 1,000 midnights, lost in sleepless lullabies. I was treating you badly, heaven's dreaming, thoughtless thoughts, my friends. We know we'll be ghosts again. We dreamed to be together forever, but those are just empty thoughts now because we are going to break up. Sundays, shining, silver linings, weightless hours, all my flowers. Yes, we had some good times. A place to hide the tears that you cried. I love the way that Dave hits that tone, by the way. Just the way he hits that note is incredible. Everybody says goodbye. Those were just moments that gave us false hope. Faith is sleeping. Lovers in the end whisper we'll be ghosts again to each other. There is no hope anymore. It's time to break up. Can you see it now? It's quite obvious, at least for me. Sorry if I ruined the song for you. And this is going back to before when I wasn't really I didn't want to give off my impression of the song because everybody can kind of take the songs as what they want to do with it. But I definitely wanted to share this with you. But, well, who says I'm right and who says it has to have only one meaning? Exactly. That's enough for this email. In the next email, I'll tell you a story about Depeche Mode, communism, and war. Best regards, Kresimir Grubik from Šibenik, Croatia. So, again, my apologies if I butchered your name there. My real last name is Logiudice. Logiudice. It means justice or the judge in Italian, so I changed it a long time ago when I got into radio because saying Logiudice was entirely too hard for some people. No, I like your interpretation of the song. I really do. And I think, as with most of Martin Gore's lyrics, they can be interpreted in a number of ways, and that certainly works. For me, I still look at it from the death perspective. That song has particular meaning for me now because of the loss of my best friend last year, Drew, and like I expected this album would, because of some of the lyrical content on there. Just because finding out about the record and the title October of last year, he passed away in June, as I mentioned before, when I was in the hospital, and so it's I miss him dearly, and I think about him every day. And as always, Depeche Mode has become incredibly cathartic for me, especially "Soul with Me." That song is just so amazingly beautiful, and I'll talk a little bit more about that here in just a second as we get into our listener feedback this week. So, Silver Fox writes, I'm anticipating this album like Violator after hearing Ghosts Again, which in my view is classic Mode, and like yourself, I've been a fan since 1985. A great review when I get Memento Mori. I shall let you know if I agree with you. Oh, I'm sure a lot of people are going to be letting me know if they agree with me or not. But as I said, a great review by yourself. Yeah. And listen, I fully expect that. I hope that I've said enough on the show that this is all subjective and people are going to disagree with me. Because I'm sure that people are going to be getting hyped because of my feeling for it and coming in with high expectations, and it may not meet those expectations. And I know that's the case, but I've also been doing radio long enough to have developed a pretty tough skin when it comes to criticism from individuals. So we'll see. To his point, though, about anticipating the album like Violator and like the fan spotlight this week from Kresimir, hearing Martin and Dave. There was an interview they did with K-Rock, which, well, okay, let me say this, and then I want to talk about K-Rock for just a second. There was an interview they did with K-Rock, and also the alt radio station in Los Angeles, because there's two stations now, and having grown up on K-Rock and reading the backstory on what happened to K-Rock is pretty amazing, which is what I wanted to mention. But Dave and Martin, it seems as if they're going through the same thing that we are as fans. They've mentioned several times during these interviews about how this time around there just seems to be a new energy. In that interview that Dave did with the NPR station in New York City, he talked about listening to the radio one Sunday morning, and he heard Ghosts Again come on and hearing his voice, and it had been a long time since he'd experienced listening to the radio and randomly hearing his voice in a Depeche Mode song on the album the way that he did. They talked about the hype around The Last of Us and Never Let Me Down Again, and just the amount of support, encouragement, and hype surrounding the record they haven't seen in a long, long time. So they seem to be feeling the same thing that we are experiencing as fans this time around, and there just is this vibe. And I think it's for a lot of reasons. I think it's because of the quality of Ghosts Again, definitely. The renewed interest in the band and people discovering Depeche Mode through The Last of Us for the very first time with Never Let Me Down Again. The passing of Fletch has brought a lot of attention to the band. Electronic music in and of itself is sort of its own thing now, and a lot of bands wouldn't exist if it wasn't, for Depeche Mode. I mean, Churches being one of them. Again, a band that I absolutely love. Another band that I discovered, I guess, maybe 2 years ago now, Gunship. Oh my gosh, if you haven't checked out Gunship, go check out Gunship. They're fantastic. But it's just such a special time to be a Depeche Mode fan. And this tour, the way that these these shows are selling out. Martin mentioned this in one of the interviews. It's just they seem to be just as surprised as everybody else. And no, I still don't have a set date yet. And I won't name anybody specifically. But can I just tell you, the number of individuals that have reached out to me with ideas or offering up of tickets to certain shows around the country, it's incredible. It's really hard for me to get away because of the job that I do, ratings periods, where these shows are located, what time of the, when during the week they're taking place. I have just not been able to nail down a date that I can get to yet. But a few of you have reached out and offered ways to, tickets and opportunities to go to a show. And it's just been like, wow, thank you. Thank you so much, guys. And I've some of you I've emailed back. Others I haven't emailed back just yet because I'm thinking about things. But it's been really, really cool. And I just wanted to say thank you. For those that have reached out to me, you know who you are, and just say how much I appreciate it. All right. Next comes from Slimonji. Comes off of a YouTube, Slimonji. I think I'm saying that right. How are the vocals from Martin on this album in the mixes as a performance? So, first off, in the mixes of the album, and I think I mentioned this before, but there seems to be more of Martin on a majority of tracks than from what I remember from recent Depeche Mode releases. It just seems like his vocals are used more, and perhaps that's because he only has one solo song on the record. But the times when he pops in, whether it's Caroline's Monkey or Always You or My Cosmos Is Mine, Martin's voice has never sounded better, in my opinion. And they've pushed it up to the forefront, and it's very noticeable in the best possible way. I wish there was another Martin track on the album because I love Martin's voice, and I love Martin's songs, but two, his voice has never sounded better, in my opinion. The way that he sings on Soul With Me it's just incredible. I mean, Martin's voice, and Dave's too, but really, Martin's voice just never sounded so good. Next up, Jason writes, and again, Jason is who contributed in Tokyo Skyline to the changing of the intro music this week. I've been enjoying your YouTube shorts and the show and tell of your memorabilia. The Exciter Pack was cool. I wish I had been at the Dodger Stadium gig. The World Violation Tour was my favorite, and the support for that show was superb. In the UK, we had Electribe 101, and I went to 2 of the 3 nights in my home city. The best memorabilia I have is a signed Music for the Masses tour program, a signed 101 CD and vinyl, some photos with the band from an in-store signing. Fletch was great fun. A few days later, I went back to the store, and the in-store window display was being taken down, so I was given a 101 hanging mobile. 3 pieces of cards spelling out Depeche Mode 101 on a piece of wire, and a 2-foot by 2-foot cardboard image, which was an unconstructed album cover with the front, back, and inside covers. They did have some polystyrene blocks with Depeche Mode 101 written on them, but they were too big to carry. I loved the promotion for 101. Just the black and white using of the T-shirt and poster image. The font of the 101, it was so simple yet powerful. I just really dug it. For Songs of Faith and Devotion, I have a ticket for the Crystal Palace gig with the band's image on it. An independent record shop was giving away Songs of Faith and Devotion carrier bag with the purchase of the album. And for Exciter, a 2-foot by 2-foot cardboard image of the front cover. Today, it was announced that this month's Mojo magazine has the world-exclusive interview and disc. We covered that on last week's show. Finally, the band looked nervous and uncertain of themselves at San Remo. And we all know they excel at live performances. I can only imagine the emotions of performing for the first time without Fletch got them. It got to me. It was weird not seeing him there on stage and knowing we never will again. His absence was telling. But their performance a few days later on French TV was much better, and Dave had his mojo back. And after a week of listening, I'm really liking Ghosts again, although I still think it sounds like it's lifted from Sounds of the Universe, albeit one of their better tracks. Take care, Jason. Yeah, it's interesting that I agree with you. I didn't really take into account the fact that, they hadn't performed in 6 years. And, the loss of Fletch obviously being... it could be a potential issue. But, yeah, I noticed in those first few performances that just Dave didn't sound like he was on key. It seemed a little stiff. But I agree, with every performance since then, it seems to have improved. And I don't think that they had done much in the way of rehearsals either. And I think Dave was still getting accustomed, especially to singing Ghosts again. All right. Lastly, before we end the show this week, I do have one more that I want to share with you, and this comes from Jason. I don't know if it's the same Jason or it's a different Jason. It says, loving the podcasts. Unlike some YouTubers where it feels like I'm being lectured, sometimes yours feels like a chat with a mate down at the pub about our favorite band. I like playing the fantasy set list as well. I think there are 3 songs that are always a must. Enjoy the Silence, Personal Jesus, and Never Let Me Down Again. Everything else is optional. But Walking in My Shoes and Precious are 2 that have appeared on each tour. I would love to see Martin do a stripped-back version of Precious in his bit of the show, and possibly Just Can't Get Enough, although that was in the live vaults for a while. Yeah, I'm kind of done with Just Can't Get Enough, to be honest with you. As the guys mentioned, they will do a few of Fletch's favorites. I expect World in My Eyes, my favorite, will appear on the set list, and I think that was his favorite as well. Friend of the show, Jon Justice, had mentioned that, as a matter of fact, let me go ahead and pull up the... Yeah, so friend of the show, Jon Justice, mentioned that... Told You So would fit well on this tour. Yeah, it depends on how many of the tracks from Memento Mori they end up doing live. I really hope this is a tour where they do a lot of songs, going back to like Songs of Faith and Devotion, where they do a majority of the album. I suspect, though, unless they plan on doing a longer set, which I don't expect, I suspect that because of the popularity of this tour and just the vast catalog, that we'll get what we've been getting the past few tours, a select number of tracks from Memento Mori, but then really a mix of what we've kind of come to expect. Unless we do end up getting some tracks like Sun in the Rainfall. And if we do, I hope they're fully produced and not just resigned to Martin's solos. That's what I'm hoping for. Jason wraps up saying, and let's see. Will they dust off People Are People, seeing how it strikes a real chord with so many reactors on YouTube? I'm surprised it never made an appearance on their last tour, given the social commentary of the song. Yeah, I thought only 3 weeks to go, well, now 2 weeks before it's all revealed. Yeah, I think a lot of that has to do with, I don't think the band is a very big fan of People Are People. I don't think Martin really is a huge fan of that song, which is one of the reasons why they haven't performed it live. If I've seemed a little scattered, by the way, on this last portion of the podcast, I've had like 5 different things going on. So I've had people that have been texting at me because the podcast for my full-time radio show were messed up, and I've been pausing the show and having to mess with that. So my apologies if the tail end of the show here feels like it's falling apart. Let me get back on focus. Be that as it may, we have reached the end of the show. Before I do have one special cover song to share with you, and one more listener feedback here in just a moment to wrap the show up. Before I do, though, I want to remind you that if you want to support my Nerd World, and the podcasts. I don't do Patreon, and I don't do paid YouTube, super chats and all that stuff. I just ask that if you like science fiction, or if you have a friend or a family member that likes science fiction, that you'll check out my science fiction space opera series. 7 books in the series, available in audiobook, ebook, hardcover, and paperback, narrated and produced by me. Written for adults, but great for ages 11 years old and older, on Amazon.com or Jon Justice. You can find it, or if you go to mynerdworld.net, there's links there on the homepage. Follow a ragtag squadron of pilots as they journey across the stars, fighting for their survival and future. Book 1 in the series goes as follows. The stars are within reach as rival megacorporations D-Corp and Enercon have made interstellar travel available to the masses. But when an industrial accident sets off an apocalyptic chain of events, all of Earth is at risk. Eternal from Spirit would actually go really, really well with EMBARK. There's a lot of portions of my story that include Depeche Mode references and inspiration as well. Getting back to the description. Meanwhile, Taft picked the right day to upgrade his ship as my dog wails in the background. When fellow pilot Keith Amaro arrived needing his help investigating a cryptic message from her late aerospace engineer father. Unaware of the disaster, Taft and Keitha make a shocking discovery. Excitement turns to fear as global evacuation begins, and the ruthless Sin Argum of D-Corp learns of the power in their possession. Taft soon realizes what Keitha's father left behind might be the only key to saving Earth's evacuees from the tyranny of D-Corp's evil leader. Again, if you like your science fiction epic with romance and filled with action, then EMBARK is perfect for you. Go to Amazon.com right now or mynerdworld.net. So here's what you can do. While you enjoy this amazing cover of Depeche Mode's Heaven, head on over to Amazon or mynerdworld.net. I received this email a few weeks ago from a friend of the show, Pamela Chelan. I hope I'm saying her name correctly, either Chelan or Chelan. I am an arts and culture journalist in Los Angeles, near and dear to my heart, who writes for Spin, Billboard, and Grammy. I also sing and write songs. My cover of Depeche Mode's Heaven premiered on the radio K-Rock's Locals Only show. I wanted to share it with you, given your love of Depeche Mode and your awesome podcast. I hope you like it. So I did ask her via email if she was okay with me sharing the song on the show, and she said that she was. I have included a link to where you can find the song in the notes for the podcast. So if you're watching this or listening on YouTube, look at the notes underneath, and you can find a link for Pamela Chelan, Chelin, Pamela Chelin. You can also find her on YouTube as well, but if you're listening to the show via the podcast on whatever platform, look at the details of it. The link is available there. It's on Amazon, it's on Spotify, it's on iTunes, it's on YouTube. So we'll wrap things up, and I'll leave you with this. This is Pamela Chelan and her version of Heaven here on My Nerd World. Thank you so much for checking out this week's show, and I hope wherever you are happy, you are healthy, you are safe. Looking forward to hearing from you. TalkShowNerd@gmail.com, or leave a comment on YouTube.
Sometimes I slide away silently. I slowly lose myself over and over. Take comfort in my skin endlessly. Surrender to my will forever and ever. I dissolve in trust. will sing with joy. I will end up dust. I'm in heaven. I stand in golden rays, radiantly I burn a fire of love. Over and over, reflecting endless light, relentlessly jump into the void. I will guide the herd up to heaven.
My Nerd World.